All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Libraries and Weight Rooms podcast. My name is DJ Ligori, and we are officially on episode number 151. Last week, we celebrated our 150th episode, and now time to get back on the horse. Hope everybody had a fantastic 4th of July holiday. I had a great holiday weekend with some friends and some family. Went back home to Rochester, New York, and had an absolute blast seeing everybody. I got to see both of my grandmas. I got to see some family, got to see some friends, and it was just fantastic. And so one of the things that over the past couple of months, I've been doing a lot of traveling back home to Rochester, New York for some weddings and then for 4th of July. And on one of the trips home, I was flying Delta. And I believe I don't know if this is standard on all Delta flights, but they have the TVs on the back of the headrests when you're sitting. And they have like a bunch of movies and cool shows you can watch or games and things. And typically when I'm on planes, I like to read or I like to listen to an audiobook. And I was curious about what they basically had on this TV. And I found out there was a masterclass on that what James Clear was basically presenting. And James Clear, for those of you who don't know, wrote Atomic Habits. And I actually have not read the book Atomic Habits, yet I've heard so many things about it. I kind of feel like I have. But I actually have it queued up in my audiobooks, so I will eventually listen to it or eventually read it. But I got basically a 10-part masterclass series on Atomic Habits and watched through all of them. And it was cool because I actually had 2 flights. And so my first flight, I watched the first 5, and the next flight, I watched the next 5. And one of the things that James Clear talked about was this idea of when we want to have a certain outcome in our life, that outcome is created by a process. And that process then starts with basically an identity. And he kind of walked it through as like identity, process, outcome. And if you think about like actually achieving some sort of result in your life, there's a certain process that you must go through in order to get that outcome. So for example, if I want to lose 10 pounds in the next 60 months, the process of doing that probably involves something with nutrition, probably involves something with some exercise routine, probably involves something around the water I'm drinking, the lack of alcohol that I'm consuming, and the amount of sleep I'm getting, right? Mixing all of that together, that is the process that hopefully gets us the outcome that we want. Now, before we actually get into the process of doing something to get the outcome, there's this first thing that Clear talks about, which is identity. And over the last couple of weeks, I've really been leaning into this idea of not being able to outperform your self-image, which basically means if you think you're a 6, you're going to perform at the level that a 6 would. You're going to have habits at the level of a 6 would. You're going to probably get results that a 6 would in your life. And so if we think we are a certain number in our life, right, if we were to actually rank our self-image and what we actually thought about ourselves, is it possible that we will actually never outperform that? So if we want to have better processes in our life, which ultimately lead to better outcomes, we must change what we actually think about ourselves. And I think a lot of this comes down to how we actually identify, right? Like, what do we actually believe we are capable of doing? And I think the easiest way to kind of understand this is making an I am statement. And I've done a lot of I am exercises through a ton of the personal development programs and coaches who have walked me through these exercises. And making an I am statement is a very powerful thing to do because it's ultimately defining who you think you are. Now, here's the thing. If we want to be more consistent, or if we want to be more disciplined, or if we want to make more money, have a better body, right, live a stronger, more fulfilling life, according to James Clear, right, these outcomes that we want, which then are created by processes, it actually starts with how we identify, right? So if you think about the things you want in your life, maybe you want to be a more disciplined person, right? Do you actually believe that you can be a more disciplined person? And do you believe that you actually deserve to be a disciplined person? Right? Because this is where we start to dive into how we actually really view ourselves. And one of the things that I think is interesting is that we create our beliefs throughout our life based upon certain moments of our life where we then put a story to that moment, and then that's the story we hold for the rest of our life until we decide to change that story. And those temporary moments of our life could have been something as small as I mentioned last week, right? I got moved to a additional class in second grade, and I created a story once I realized why I was in that class that I was not smart. Does that mean that I'm not smart? No, it's just the story that I created. Now, through a lot of the work that I've done over the past 5 to 6 years, I've developed new decisions and new beliefs. And what I've done is I've backed up those decisions and those beliefs with as much evidence as I can to actually prove that this is a true thing in my life, or at least I'm going to perceive it to be true. So if you want to change a belief, or in this case, the way that we identify or what we actually think about ourselves, we must change the way that we think or the belief that we actually have. And so what we can do is, and I've actually learned this from David Bayer. He is one of my coaches, you could say, or one of my mentors. And I went through his Mind Hack program, and I'm currently doing some more business programs with him now. He has this thing called a belief matrix, which is basically we have certain beliefs in our life that don't make us feel good. These are what we would call a limiting belief. In order to change these beliefs, we have to basically make a new decision. And then we have to find evidence to support that new decision. And so a belief is really just a decision, right? So now if we think about how we actually view ourselves, I believe I am blank is really just a decision that we make. And we make those decisions based upon the evidence that we have or what we have experienced. So now what if we decided to make a new decision and then find other evidence to support that decision? Because what I've realized is throughout our lives, we don't necessarily need to learn all of these new things. We really just need to remember the things that actually worked that we just happen to forget along the way. Because I've had multiple times where somebody has said something, I'm like, man, I've heard that before, and that is really helpful, and I haven't necessarily brought it into my life, yet it's just something that I was kind of unaware of until that point. They then said something, or I was taught something, and I'm like, yes, like I remember learning that once, and like, man, I really think I can apply this here, right? Now, don't get me wrong, yes, we're going to learn new things along this whole experience, yet maybe this is really just about remembering what has worked, or actively trying to go find these little pieces of evidence to support a new decision or a new identity and this new belief. So if we want to change what we think about ourselves, we have to make a new decision about ourselves. And what we can then do is we make this new decision. So let's say, for example, you don't think that you can be a disciplined person. All right. Your new decision could be, I am a disciplined person. And then what you do is you go and find as many pieces of evidence as you can that supports that new decision that you are a disciplined person. Now, initially you might be saying, but I don't think I'm a disciplined person, yet I want to be a disciplined person. Okay, right? When you make that new decision, your brain, there's something called the reticular activating system, right? So when we make this decision of I am a disciplined person, your brain is going to find evidence to support that new belief. And so you can actually go through your memories and your experiences and find 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces of evidence that can actually support that new belief that you are a disciplined person. Because here's what happens with the outcomes in your life, right? Let's go back to James Clear thing. If I now identify as a disciplined person and I have 5 to 10 different pieces of evidence, and these can be very simple things, right? This can literally be, hey, I said last week that I was going to feed my dog, right, each day, and I did, right? Use that as a piece of evidence that you said you did what you said you were going to do, right? Discipline is about knowing what to say yes to and knowing what to say no to, and sometimes making those uncomfortable decisions, yet you said you were going to do it, and you did it. Nobody needed to know about it except for you, right? That's how important discipline is. And so you can use those small little pieces of evidence to stack as many of those pieces as you can to basically support this new decision that you are a disciplined person. All right. So then what happens is you start to identify as, you know what, I am a disciplined person, right? Here's the 10 pieces of evidence that support that new decision. you then start to change your processes and the process that you start to basically create in order to get the outcomes that you want in your life, because you're now believing that you're a disciplined person. So now do you think you might act a little bit differently? Now do you think your self-image of, hey, I used to think I was a 6, now, maybe I'm a 7, maybe I'm an 8. Maybe I'm going to take myself a little bit more serious, right? Maybe I'm going to take a little bit of time for myself, right? Maybe I'm going to treat myself like an asset or like an investment. And so what ends up happening is your process starts to change, right? The way that you act on a daily basis, right? Your behaviors, your habits, your routines. And eventually then your outcomes start to change because going all the way back, right? You started to identify as a disciplined person or whatever you're trying to identify as, right? So I wanted to just bring this up because this idea of we will never outperform our self-image, I think is so important, because what we think about ourselves when we're by ourselves may be the most important thoughts that can come into our brain. And it may be the most important thoughts that we act on and bring into the world. Because if we don't think very highly of ourselves, will we think that we deserve to have the life that we want? Right? So what can we do to actually improve what we think about ourselves? Right? Well, let's make new decisions. Let's establish new beliefs. And let's support those decisions and those beliefs with as much evidence as we can find that we are actually being who we think we are capable of being. And as that starts to happen, we're going to start to change the way that we behave. We're going to start to develop new routines, new habits, because we're taking ourselves more serious, because we have all of this evidence that supports we are actually being who we really want to be. That's when our outcomes will then start to change, because ultimately we're changing, right? If nothing changes, nothing changes. And it starts with changing how we ultimately view ourselves. So this is something, and I hope this makes sense, and I hope if James Clear ever hears this, I did an okay of supporting his basically this theory of identity, process, and outcome. And if you want any more about this, I highly recommend listening to Atomic Habits, or at least reading it. I know just from that 10-piece masterclass, it was phenomenal, and I really, really enjoyed it. And it made complete sense to me about this idea of, we're never going to basically outwork our identity. Right? We have to identify as the thing that we ultimately want to bring into the world, or else we're just going to constantly be in misalignment, and there's going to constantly be this friction and this agitation, and we're going to get frustrated and not think that we can actually create the things that we want. All right. So thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode. I hope you got some value out of it. And as always, if you liked it, we always appreciate a like, a rating, a review, subscribe to any of the channels, or send it to a friend who you think is in the process of currently trying to make some changes in their life. Hopefully you're trying to make some changes in your life for the better as well. So thank you guys so much for your time and your energy. Keep doing hard things through both mental and physical fitness, and we will talk to you guys soon. See ya.